After 2.5 years of having our Tacoma with a Go Fast camper on the back, traveling all over the West, we decided it was finally time to make a change, so we sold it. We needed something that would fit our new lifestyle a little bit better. Now that Sadie's full-time in her business of photography and we have a puppy, we wanted to be able to run, hike, bike, and just travel around more easily while still having Sadie be able to work and the puppy be comfortable. So this story starts about, 10 years ago probably, when we first started seeing camper vans being built. And you see these awesome all-wheel drive ones, specifically the Mercedes back then, and they were just like these badass vans, but the price tags were absolutely ridiculous, like 100,000 plus. And so I had a truck, used to camp in it a ton, but it was cold, short bed, so I sold it, got the Subaru, built the camper in that, camped in that thing a ton, drove all over the place. It was wonderful because it was heated, efficient, all sorts of good reasons. And then I bought a van, that old crappy Ford that was super beat up, bought it really cheap, and I wanted to get a lap building that thing for experience. And so that was when Sadie and I were dating. I built that thing out, ended up renting out my house, and I moved into that van and lived in it for 6 months. And it was really good because I learned a lot in the process of building it, made a little bit of money when I sold it. I had to sell it because we ended up getting the little cottage that we're in now, and I was going to be starting that renovation project, and so I need something reliable to haul lumber with, all sorts of stuff. So that's why I sold it, bought the Tacoma, got the Go Fast camper, which also kind of doubled as a lumber rack, and driven that for the last 2.5 years. And then here in the last couple of months, after a few trips where we were trying to work remotely, Sadie was specifically like on her laptop, we were staying in tents or in the truck, and we just kind of got tired of being woken up by vehicles driving past, taking all the time it took to set everything up, and just dealing with, I guess, the cold and stuff. And so, as you know, much as we love camping and all these things, there's just certain trips where the sleep part of it, we don't want to be the struggle. We want to be, mountain biking or hiking or doing hard things in that way. And so we started talking about a van again, and went down the rabbit hole, looked at Mercedes again. They're still expensive, and it sounds like they're expensive to repair, which led us towards Fords because they have an all-wheel drive option, but they've only been making those for a few years, and they are quite expensive, even if you can find a used one. And so if you find a used one, they're hardly any cheaper than new, and they're probably white, and they're probably not exactly the build that you want. And so we looked at Fords. We're going hard down that rabbit hole, ordering just a brand new one. That was where we kind of committed till we found this van. We looked at it, drove it, and then stepped away for a couple weeks. They lowered the price. We came back, drove it again, did the math, and we're like, okay, at this point, this thing will end up being somewhere around a little more than half of the cost of what the Ford would have been to buy and build out. And so while financially we feel like the Ford wasn't a terrible decision, we just figured if we did this, it would leave us with more flexibility for other things, and just be a more efficient way of going about this process. And so here we are in our new 2021 Ram ProMaster 159 with a handful of bells and whistles, upgraded, still under factory warranty, which I'm really excited about, and only 7,000 miles on it. So it's by far the newest vehicle I've ever owned. And we're just pumped to have it. It's a blank slate, and I think it's going to be an awesome platform for us to be able to build out and then just do more traveling together when we have to kind of do a hybrid of work, whether the weather's terrible or it should just make things more efficient. And we're really excited. So stick around for build out process, because that is to be coming. So, it was owned by a guy who ran like an event company, so it was kind of built out, but unfortunately it's not insulated. It's obviously super weird. The floor looks like crap, so I'm probably just gonna tear it all out and restart, but it's kind of cool to just see what it could look like had it been done properly. And I don't know if I'll be able to salvage this stuff after I rip it out, but. And then up here, got this big old shelf up here, which is nice because the Fords don't have that we were looking at. And then it also came with swivel seats already, so that'll save us a bunch of time, some money in the process, and they both do it. If you've been forward. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here, give me a shake if you agree. Okay. Sweet. We're on the same page then. It's all ours, Maru. You excited? Let's do this. Okay. And so it starts. What do I want to destroy first? I think I'll pull this bad boy out. As painful as it was to dive straight into just tearing apart this beautiful shiplap covered wall and ceiling, I really didn't have an option because, one, I didn't know exactly what was behind it, but I was pretty sure it was not properly insulated, and I was correct. That top corner has some spray foam insulation, but apparently they gave up after doing that corner. And while there was wall coverings on there and there was the sheathing behind it, it was done fairly poorly, and so I'm not much of an electrician, but the wiring looked pretty good. Carpentry did not. So I'm guessing it was done by, I don't even know, maybe a radio type shop. Either way, I'm glad I tore it out because I am going to build it back a lot more sturdy, a lot more reliably, and I'll know exactly what's behind it, including insulation. Alright, because every new project deserves a new tool. Got some countersink bits this morning. Loads, a little paint to seal up those holes from the prior build, and then I slipped and accidentally got a new grill while I was at it, so yeah, I guess I don't have to use my little camp grill on a cooler in the backyard anymore because it's been making me mad. So new Blackstone grill. Super pumped about this. We are officially to the point where I have to start making a plan for the build back. I got everything stripped out. And I am about ready to start installing fan, windows, insulation, sound deadening, and everything. But we are actually planning our first trip already here in just like a week and a half. And so what I'm going to do is kind of do a throw together quick version. That way we can go on this trip, use the things that we have that we're able to fit in, piece together, and spend some time in it and just make some decisions as to what actually makes sense for us and what we want to include in the official build. So here is some of the stuff I have so far. Ordered up these windows. I've got 2 windows, one for each side. They'll be right above the bed, and those will be vents, basically inlets primarily. We got our vent fan. That'll be going in the front, and that'll be the outlet. So that'll be where we push all of the air out. And then we've got this Iceco freezer. It's a dual zone. I'm super excited about this. My last van, I had an Iceco product in it as well. It was a smaller, I think a 40 liter, and it was good. Well, it was a great refrigerator, but it was a little bit small. And now that there's going to be 2 of us potentially doing longer trips, I wanted to do something a little bit bigger, and I especially wanted something that could have freezer optionality as well. So this one's really cool. It's got 2 different lids, so you can have it segmented, leave the freezer closed, so you're not just bleeding off all the cold air every time you open it in the summer. And they're very efficient. Like I can't remember the exact numbers, but as far as electrical draw, it's a 12 volt refrigerator freezer, and it doesn't draw very much. And so yeah, super excited about that. This one's 60 liters, so it's plenty big for the 2 of us, for I would say somewhere in the 4 to 5 day ballpark, which is really what I have in mind for this van, because in between work days I usually have 4 days off, or I figure it's pretty rare that we spend more than 4 days in an area without any access to food or water, because we just tend to ramble around and yeah, just kind of cruise. So that's that. I also got this toilet. Oh, actually, back to the thing. I've got a slider in there as well. So I think I'm going to mount it up in a way that I have it on a slide so I can access it from where the door is. Anyways, those 2 pair together so I can secure it down. Excited about that. I'll show you that later. But I've also got my toilet here. This is a cassette toilet. Talk about that more another time. But while I don't tend to have a need for toilets most of the time, because when we're outdoors, you use the outdoors, or if you're around town, you use the town amenities, and then you just don't have to deal with it. But this seems like a pretty cool option. It's the Gotta Go toilet from Julka, and we're gonna give that a go for this build. So there's a slide, there's a blank slate. I left the wires from the last person, the lighting up there. Might reuse those, but I need to remove this cross member, that vertical member there, and the one here, because this is where these new windows are going to go. And the big priorities for me in the next week before we go is to get the refrigerator in and secured somehow, potentially actually mounted, and then some sort of bed situation, some sort of bike storage situation, since we're gonna have bikes, skis, and yeah, it's also potentially gonna be cold, so I gotta figure out what we want to do about the heater until we get a permanent one. That wasn't very smooth. We'll get some more practice. Are you skittish now? To prep the van for the insulation and the sound deadening, as well as the windows and the fans I was going to be installing, I needed to remove these side cross members, which, as scary as it looks and it feels to do, it's actually made for it. And so I got those removed, cleaned up some of the adhesive that was left behind, and then I started applying the kill mat to all of the big surfaces to help dampen the sound. Now seems like a good time to go for a walk with Maru and talk about my new partnership with Huckberry. If you're not familiar, they are an online men's clothing and gear retailer, and they have some really cool content on YouTube and on their site as well. Now, I'm a bit of a weirdo, and I really don't enjoy clothes shopping, like at all, as I'm sure you can tell by what I wear. But if you're in a similar boat, you might actually find their website to be super useful, because they have a ton of different guides to help style blind people like me find their way through this life. And Sadie agrees that it seems to be working. So anyways, I got some of their new gear, and so far my favorites have been their Merino 72-hour series. So they have shirt and pants that are a Merino blend, and they are just incredibly comfortable. And if you've been watching for a while, you know I'm a huge fan of Merino and just how it can take abuse. You can work like crazy in it, and it just resists looking and smelling bad for a really long time. So these are going to be my new everyday go-tos, and I'll link them as well as some of my other favorites up down below for you to check out. So go check out Huckberry, and thank you for supporting this project. Okay, so we got a bunch of insulation in the last couple days. I didn't video any of it, but I got most of the panels covered with insulation. This 3M thin slit. Seems really rad. It was easy to work with. I just sliced it with a razor blade and trauma shears to make it fit, and then used spray adhesive to attach it to the walls and the ceiling. And then I cut a bunch of strips to pull through all of these different channels that were hollow, which took quite a bit of time, but got most of it done. And so today I am installing the ceiling fan and the rear window on both sides. And because it's so cold, it's like 13 degrees out, I am at my buddy's shop, which this is just luxury. I mean, it's warm, everything. So we're gonna do that, set the sealant all works. I got a frame built back there, and that's gonna be the backing. So it'll go on the underside of the ceiling here for the screws from the fan to reach into, give it a more solid grab. And yeah, goal for today is 2 windows, vent fan. Because this weekend, I have to have it together enough to go on a trip to Arizona. Because it's a camper van, obviously windows and just different vents are totally necessary. And this part of the project is definitely the most intimidating for me, where you're just cutting holes into the ceiling and the walls of a perfectly good camper van. But I'm glad that I had the lap through a similar process on the old Econoline that I had. So that took a bit of the edge off of the fear of going through this process. I got the hole cut into the ceiling, put the frame that I had built on the underside and adhesive that to the ceiling just as a backer board so that the flange has something more robust to screw into. Pre-drilled all of the holes using a flange on top, and then taped up the paint so I didn't damage it while I was working around. Got all my screws in after putting the butyl tape on the flange edge, and then I took some self-leveling sealant and covered all of the screw heads as well as a bead around the entire edge, just to make sure that no water will ever get inside of here, since this will live its entire life outside. One of the cool things about this vent is that you can use it while you're driving and while it is raining. Because those vent holes are facing back, it's totally safe no matter what the conditions are. Okay, the vent fan is in, drying. I can't put this bottom side on until I finish the ceiling, so that's done for today. Now it's onto the windows. So this is the first window right here. It goes on the driver's side over there. And I've got the flange down there, so I just got to trace it out on the cardboard, figure out where it's going to go on the wall, cut the hole, giant hole in the wall, and then install it similarly to how I did that with the bundle tape and then a little bit of sealant. So here goes another couple hours per window. To get the windows positioned correctly, I used the cardboard cutout template and just taped it onto the wall, and then measured around to make sure everything was going to fit with the mattress below it and the trim that would have to go above it. Then after that, traced it onto the wall, grabbed my jigsaw, and ripped a hole in the side of the van and hoped that it was the right size. After the window holes were cut, I taped off all of the surrounding, and then I filed the raw metal edges smooth and added a little bit of paint just to prevent any rust that might happen if moisture were to ever find its way in there. And then I added the sealant tape around the flange of the window that came with it, which was a little bit different than the butyl tape from the vent fan, but kind of a similar concept. And then I set it onto the outside and had my buddy hold it tight there while I added the flange from the inside and screwed it all together. Windows in. These screws all just kind of sandwich it together and looks pretty good to me. I'm pumped about it. We got a nice slider inlet with a screen, keep the dog in, bugs out. Boom, all sealed up. And they said it's optional to do a sealant on the outside, and so I decided I do want to. And this is what I'm going to use. Cap sealant from this Decor. So this is the non-sagging, so it's a little bit different than that lap sealant I put on top. That stuff was like self-leveling, so it kind of like filled in the holes, whereas this one, because it's on the wall, we don't want gravity to be pulling it around. So throw some of this in, start on window number 2. All right, so it is a new day. I ended up leaving this van in the shop overnight just that it had some heat so that sealant and stuff could dry, because again, it got down into the low teens last night and this morning. And so got the vent fan, windows in. It actually went relatively smoothly. I'm very happy I went with these windows, even though they're crazy expensive. I, based on recommendations of people online, went with them, and I can see why. They look really good, they installed easy, and I'm excited to have them. So now, today, I have to get the rest of the installation up. So both sides of the fan that I left here, both panels around the windows, wheel wells. And then I'm going to take a look at fixing the situation with the holes in the side panel of the van, since I'm in the shop and they have a bunch of metal working equipment available. Okay, so the installation is complete. Whole van's pretty much set to go. But while I'm at this shop here, because of all the metal working equipment, I decided that I want to try to solve this 4-piece problem that I have. So the prior owner, like I mentioned before, for his business, for some reason I think he had like taps for kombucha or beer or something inside, and they ran the hoses through the wall. So they cut these circle holes, and before selling it, they put these little mirror caps over them just to seal them from the weather. And while it's not necessarily a problem, it doesn't look great, and so I want to solve this. And so the thing I'm going to do is pull the cap off, take some of this spare metal that I cut from the window holes right here, and cut a square patch, probably a 6" by 6" or so square, sandwich it from the inside of the metal right up here against the wall, put a bunch of sealant stuff in that, and then take that same metal, cut a coin that's exactly the size, and sandwich that in from the outside with some more sealant, and then that way it's at least nice and flush and less obvious, like that big bubble is. And if it's still super noticeable, because at that point it'll be weather tight and so it'll be secure, I guess. But if it's still really ugly and noticeable, then I might take a vinyl wrap of some sort, maybe some sort of Road to Ridge inspired design on the outside, and just put it right over the top. So then it'll be solid, fully waterproof, and hidden by that vinyl wrap, and never visible again. So a couple of days of working inside of this heated shop in the middle of winter made me feel incredibly spoiled, and also now I'm really dreaming of having a shop someday. But I was done with all the exterior work, and so it was time to head back home and start on some of the interior carpentry so that I could get it set up for our trip coming up in about a week. Alright, it is a new day, and a snowy one at that. Back at home, working in the cold. Today's goal is to get a bed platform in. So this weekend we're taking off on a trip to do a trial run. I need a place to sleep and a place to store bikes underneath. And so I've got a bunch of hardware. I picked up some plywood last night, which, holy cow, this stuff is worth gold. I got some 3/4 inch, some 1/2 inch, and some 1/4 inch. I think I'm primarily going to use 3/4 inch to build the frame. I bought some slats on Amazon. This is just your standard bed slats with webbing for holding them together with the proper spacing to go under the mattress. So we'll have ventilation under the mattress. And I did a little quick math, and these things were actually cheaper to buy than to build out of plywood because plywood's so expensive right now. So gotta get my height dialed in, figured out how I'm gonna anchor up my end supports, kind of my ledger boards, if you will. And then those will be what I hang the whole bed on. And it's pretty much just gonna be floating off of the wall for now. I don't wanna have to use any ground support. So we'll see if I can do that. That, my friends, is how you ruin a good day. One of the things that's important to us on this build is having the ability to store our bikes inside underneath our bed, just so that they're safe and secure when you're in the cities, and then also so that when you're driving through inclement weather, especially in the winter, they don't just get covered in road grime and rust out like what happened to us a couple of years ago after coming through Salt Lake in the middle of winter. All right, so I've got these rib nuts, which are, well, they're rivets, but instead of collecting two things together and sandwiching them, it rivets onto the sheet metal through a hole and sandwiches onto the sheet metal, and then offers you some threads on the backside. So then you can thread a bolt into it rather than just using self-tapping screws into there, which may be problematic eventually, or at a minimum they're slightly less easy to pull out, replace over and over if you for some reason need to pull something off to fix something behind it or whatever. So in the end, it ends up looking like this, and this little tiny sandwich of metal right there between those two little bumps, those are that's where the sheet metal will be, and so it'll be sandwiched on there. These threads are all behind the metal. This is where your material is, and then obviously the head holds it on, and you just add washers and whatever you need to make it fit. So I'm going to install some M8 rib nuts through these factory holes right here. That way there's no new drilling, there's no new raw metal exposed or anything like that, and I can then just bolt the ledger board directly to it. And these are some stout bolts, and so the goal of getting a floating bed will be doable without feeling like you might be, falling to the ground. So obviously this is my first time using rib nuts, and there are a few other options out there that some people think are better, but for this go I just wanted to give them a try, and that way I didn't have to use the self-tapping screws that were kind of my other readily available option. So I got a bunch of them set up, and then my goal, like I mentioned before, was to create a ledger board of sorts to carry the weight of the entire bed. And so I want that to span between these two horizontal ribs, and that way it just added a little bit better shear strength between those two pieces with the plywood. So I cut out the holes in the plywood. In order to get our bed to go sideways through the bed end to end, you have to make use of every last inch, and so those holes in the middle are actually going to be where the mattress sticks through, and then we will have about 6 foot 4 inches total, which leaves me about 4.5 inches of extra space. And since I sleep like a mummy, that's entirely necessary. So after a bit of test fitting and trial and error, I actually stripped out 2 different rib nuts and had to cut them completely out and remove them, which was a bit of a pain in the butt. But I got them replaced, and then I used these pin marking holes that go inside of the rib nut holes, and I just held the boards up, tapped them on, and that marred the location of where I needed to pre-drill for the bolts. And so I got that all sorted out, and then I dove into doing the cross members for the supports of the bed itself. And to do that, I had to find a way to do it with a very low profile, since the height of the bikes plus the mattress on top plus me on top, and I wanted to be able to sit up, left very little space for the actual framing of the bed, and I didn't want to go with a metal structure. So my theory was to use plywood, since it has fairly good shear strength, and orient it vertically and then just sandwich it together using strips until I got the strength that I needed to. So I just went to town and started building a structure that would be 3 pieces, 1 on each end and then 1 in the middle, and I figured I would just keep sandwiching until I had the strength that I needed. All right, it is a new day. Yesterday was so soggy, last night was just a mess, but I really wanted to get that bed done, and so got it most of the way there, got it set up, and then dried overnight inside of the van, even though there's so much moisture in there, but kept the temps up with a heater. So now today I've got to finish that off. I've got to get the I want to get it reinforced a little bit more. I need a little more support in the belly of the bed itself. The ridge or the edges seem pretty solid, and then I've got to get the walls patched up, the wiring kind of tucked away, because I basically have 5 hours to get this thing ready for a 10-day road trip, because I go to work, and as soon as we get off work, we're leaving. So go for it today. Get the bed solid, trustworthy. I need to get the bike rack clamp things for the axles in, and just kind of resituate things around to where it'll be okay for 10 days. So like I mentioned before, I built the front and the back of this frame to be the same, and then I built the middle a little bit differently. So it's kind of a ladder looking structure. It's 2 cross members tied together with 2 different cross members going perpendicular, and that just helped to tie them together to better support those cross members from the mattress support that I bought and put on there. So on the faces, I added a little bit more strength, a little bit more width, and then I assembled it all back together, threw the mattress on top, and here's the test. Hold my weight in the middle. Okay. Time will tell, or an instant replay will tell, but it didn't feel too bad. I mean, this bed frame, okay. I think each individual board would carry my weight. So with 2 of us on there, even if all of our weight landed on one, this one, theoretically, I think we're good. First win. Now I got like 3 hours to get this thing fully patched together, ready for a road trip. So next up is wall coverings, bike rack, finding a place for a fridge, and either a lawn chair or maybe a table or something like that. So gotta keep moving. I decided to put some of the plastic wall paneling back in for this trip, even though it was a bit cut up, just because it fit and would be good to help just protect some of the insulation that's exposed on this trip. And then I built a bike rack in the back using a 2x12 that I had laying around, some 2x4s, and a tie down strap that I put between the 2 tie points in the back just to hold it in place. Then I grabbed my 2 bikes that we were going to be bringing with us and the fork frame mounts that I had, and I installed them all in there just to hold them nice and snug for this trip. And then it was time to throw the refrigerator in, and this part is one of the most exciting components because it just makes life easy when you're on the road. And I had an Iceco fridge in my last van, and it worked so well that I want to get another one, and this time a little bit bigger since it was going to be 2 of us. So this one can fit 60 liters of food, drinks. It's dual zone, so you can have one side fridge, one side freezer, both fridge, whatever you want, and it'll run 110 or 12 volt. So we'll be using our Jackery to power it through this trip. And I also put a makeshift table in just so that we had a place to cook and eat while we're on this trip. And then I set a few coolers in so that I could tie them down using the handles, and those would act as our cabinet space while we are doing this trial run. With the temporary build all put together, we jumped in the van and headed south. I had a little bit of time off of work, and now that Sadie's full-time in her wedding photography business, the off-season time tends to have a little bit more flexibility because most of her work ends up being on her computer or on her phone. And so we headed south down to Utah to visit Zion National Park, where we had never been before. We camped outside of the park for a night. We went for a trail run inside of the park out to one of the coolest viewpoints I think we've ever seen. We haven't been to many national parks ourselves yet, but we feel like this van is going to be the perfect tool to start integrating those into our trips, especially in the winter when the weather up north is just kind of bad. So this was one of the epic viewpoints that we had. And then the next morning, after we camped up just outside of the park, we headed back in to do one of the most iconic hikes of all time, I think, the Angel's Landing hike, where you climb up this spine of a ridge up to a high point, and you kind of get a view all the way up and down the Zion Canyon, and it was awesome. And then after that, we hopped back in the van and headed south down to Sedona, which for this time of year, it was unusually warm, and there was pretty much snow, and I was pumped because I've been wanting to mountain bike for a while. All right, another bike ride time. Sadie's bike, my bike, sunny, beautiful day.
Cocktail of the year.
Damn that cocktail. Oh, gone. It's gonna be a little stiff.
There?
Yeah. KOM fuel, I think. First ride this morning, 21 miles. Second ride with Sadie, 8.6 miles. And then at the end of that one, I just made the little attempt. Let's see what it says. I'm still moderately training ready. My battery's at 35%. Now, Strava. Oh, look at that. KOM.
No way.
In Arizona.
That's awesome.
Once again, just gotta find the smallest pond to become the big fish in. That's what it's all about. 352. Oh wait, did I get it? All time, 352. What was the prior one? I thought it was faster than that. By 1 second.
No way.
Yeah, wow.
That's
Barely got
awesome.
it.
So did that for
Sedona was epic, and after a couple days of riding, we hopped in the van, and I'll tell you what, we were feeling so pumped about this situation. So far, the van just made life so easy on the road. And so we linked up with my brother and his wife down in Prescott, where he was getting ready to run a 100K ultramarathon. And so we joined them, crewed him for the day to help watch him suffer through the mountains and hopefully learn a little bit from the process. And then after that, we bombed down to Phoenix for a few days where we hung out with friends. I got some more biking in. And then we had to start the long haul back home to Idaho, where it was 8 degrees after a week in Arizona in the 70s. But we were pumped because this van has been awesome, and we cannot wait to get it completely built out and share more with you guys.